The late summer sun burned across the quiet suburban street, throwing long shadows over the iron gates of the most expensive mansion on the block. It was a neighborhood run by the HOA, the kind of place where rules were written in stone and enforced with a smile that never reached the eyes. But this afternoon, something unusual was happening. A tall black man in a tailored suit pulled his sleek SUV up to the gates. The vehicle purred softly as he lowered the window, expecting the sensor to recognize his pass and swing the gates wide open. After all, this was his home. He had paid for every brick, every tile, every blade of grass on the manicured lawn behind those gates, yet the gates didn't move. Instead, two HOA representatives, clipboard in hand, stood firmly at the entry. One of them, a sharp-nosed woman, with sunglasses perched on her head, stepped forward and waved for him to stop completely. "Sir, you can't enter here," she said, her voice crisp and dripping with false authority. The man tilted his head slowly, almost amused. His name was Marcus Steele. To the world, he was a highly decorated veteran. To the neighbors, he was the mysterious new owner of the largest mansion in the community. And right now, to the HOA, he was apparently a problem. He spoke calmly, but his deep voice carried power. "This is my property. Move aside." The woman smirked as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Not until we confirm. We don't recognize you as a resident." Marcus leaned back, staring at the gates that refused to open. He could feel the weight of their gaze, the silent judgment, the unspoken prejudice. He had seen it too many times before. Even after serving his country in places these people couldn't even point out on a map. But Marcus wasn't just any man. He was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His silence alone made people nervous. He tapped a button on his steering wheel. "Open the gate." The gates remained locked. The HOA reps crossed their arms, doubling down. For a moment, Marcus considered simply waiting them out. But then a flicker of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. If they wanted to play games, they had no idea who they were dealing with, because Marcus Steele wasn't alone. He never was. The phone call. From his SUV, Marcus spoke in a low tone, almost a whisper. "Stand by. We've got a situation." Less than 5 miles away, in a discreet building with no signs, a group of men and women straightened in unison. They weren't ordinary friends. They weren't co-workers. They were a special ops crew, hand-picked, battle-tested, loyal beyond measure. These weren't people you called for barbecues or casual get-togethers. These were the kind of people you called when everything was on the line. And Marcus had just made that call, back at the gate. The HOA woman tapped her clipboard, raising her chin. "You'll need to step out of the vehicle. We can't have unauthorized people loitering around." "Here." Marcus chuckled under his breath. "Unauthorized? Ma'am, I paid cash for this estate. I outrank everyone on this block." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." By now, a couple of curious neighbors peeked through their windows. Some even stepped outside, whispering to each other. The sight of Marcus being blocked at his own gate was already stirring gossip. And that was exactly what the HOA wanted: control, dominance, and a show of power. But Marcus was in no mood to put on a show. He was in the mood to make a point. Minutes later, the low rumble of engines broke the silence. From down the street, 3 black SUVs approached, moving in perfect formation. The HOA rep stiffened. This wasn't Uber. This wasn't FedEx. The vehicle stopped behind Marcus's car, doors swinging open with military precision. Out stepped 6 men and women in plain clothes, but their posture gave them away immediately. Shoulders squared, eyes scanning, movements razor-sharp. They weren't here to talk. They were here to stand. One of them, a tall man with scars on his knuckles, spoke loud enough for the HOA to hear. "Boss, everything good?" Marcus leaned out his window, finally allowing himself a full smile. "Not yet, but it's about to be." The HOA woman's confidence faltered. She took a step back, realizing she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Because Marcus Steele wasn't just a homeowner. He was a man who commanded respect everywhere he went, and if he didn't get it, he brought the kind of people who would make sure he did. And this was only the beginning. What would you do if someone tried to block you from your own home? Would you stay calm like Marcus or bring in backup? Comment below with your answer. The street had never been this quiet. Not during neighborhood block parties, not during summer barbecues, not even when the HOA hosted their annual garden contest. Now the only sounds were the soft hum of Marcus's SUV and the steady breaths of his special ops crew, lined up like shadows behind him. The HOA rep suddenly didn't look so confident. The woman with the sunglasses adjusted them nervously, while the man beside her shuffled his papers, his hands trembling. But still, they tried to keep their posture. After all, in their minds, they were the law of the neighborhood. Marcus stepped out of his vehicle. The moment his shoes hit the pavement, the air shifted. His 6'3" frame carried the weight of someone who had stared down danger in deserts, jungles, and war zones far more hostile than this gated community could ever imagine. He closed the door slowly, deliberately. His crew spread out, forming a protective arc behind him. Marcus's eyes locked onto the HOA woman. "I'll say this once," he began, his voice calm, but heavy like thunder on the horizon. "Move out of my way." The woman swallowed hard. Her bravado cracked for a second, but she forced a smirk back onto her lips. "This community has rules, sir. And rules apply to everyone. I don't care who you think you are." Marcus chuckled, a deep sound that made a couple of neighbors gasp. "Who I think I am," he repeated. "Lady, I know who I am. The problem is, you don't." The neighbors watch. Phones started coming out. Curtains parted wider. The HOA had staged a spectacle, but they hadn't expected it to turn into a showdown. One teenager whispered to his friend, "Yo, I think he's the guy who bought the Miller estate. My dad said he paid cash." Another woman across the street muttered, "Why won't they let him in?" That's his house. The tide of opinion was already turning. People who normally bowed to the HOA's authority were now questioning their motives, and Marcus knew it. He didn't need to shout to win this battle. He just needed to stand tall and let their own arrogance bury them. The crew steps forward. One of Marcus's men, a lean operator named Torres, stepped closer to him. His voice was calm, but there was steel behind it. "Boss, just say the word. We'll clear the way." Marcus lifted a hand. Not yet. He didn't want this to turn into chaos. He wanted control, discipline, respect. That's what had carried him through years of missions where one wrong move meant none of them came home. The HOA man, who had been silent until now, finally piped up. "Look, you can't just show up here with a gang. This is a peaceful neighborhood." Torres laughed, shaking his head. "Gang? Buddy, we're the reason you get to sleep peacefully at night." The HOA man's face flushed red, but he didn't respond. Marcus makes a point. Marcus stepped closer to the gate, his eyes never leaving the woman blocking it. "You see, here's the difference between you and me. You hide behind clipboards and bylaws. I stand behind people who'd lay down their lives for me. That's not power written on paper. That's real power, earned." The woman opened her mouth to protest, but Marcus raised a hand, cutting her off. "And just so you understand, this property isn't yours to control. It's mine. Paid for, signed, sealed, delivered. If you think otherwise, you're welcome to test me. But I promise you won't like the results." The crew behind him didn't flinch. They didn't have to. Their silence said everything. Tension builds. A neighbor finally broke the silence. "Let him in. He lives there." Another voice chimed in, louder this time. "He owns that place. You know it." The HOA woman turned, glaring at the small but growing crowd. But for every glare she sent, she got whispers of doubt and murmurs of support for Marcus in return. Her grip on authority was slipping, and she knew it. Marcus leaned casually against the hood of his SUV. "You know what the funny thing is? I didn't even want this to turn into a scene. I just wanted to go home, put my feet up, and enjoy the house I worked my whole life to earn. But since you decided to make it a scene, let's make it one worth remembering." With a subtle nod from Marcus, his crew moved. Not aggressively, not violently, just deliberately. Two of them stepped forward and flanked him, while another pulled a sleek black folder from the SUV. Inside was every piece of legal documentation proving Marcus's ownership of the estate. Property deeds, bank receipts, signatures. All official, all undeniable. The folder was handed to the HOA reps like a loaded weapon. "Read it," Marcus said. The HOA man flipped through the papers, his face draining of color with every page. The woman tried to keep her composure, but it was slipping like sand through her fingers. When she finally looked up, Marcus's eyes were locked on hers. "Now," he said quietly, "open my gate." The sound of defeat. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, With a shaky breath, the HOA woman pressed a button on her phone. The iron gates creaked and groaned as they swung open. Marcus didn't move right away. He let the sound linger, let it echo like victory in the air. The neighbors watching erupted into murmurs, some even clapping softly. The HOA had been exposed. Marcus finally slid back into his SUV, his crew closing in behind him. Before pulling forward, he rolled down the window and delivered one last line. "Next time you see me, remember, I don't need permission to come home. And neither does anyone who earns their place." With that, his SUV glided forward, disappearing beyond the gates as his crew followed. The neighborhood would never forget what they had just witnessed. But for Marcus Steele, this was just the beginning. Do you think Marcus handled this the right way by staying calm and proving ownership? Or should he have let his crew clear the way immediately? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The gates had closed behind Marcus's convoy, but the storm outside hadn't settled. Neighbors lingered on sidewalks, whispering in disbelief. The HOA reps were left standing at the curb, humiliated, their authority shredded in front of the very people they claimed to control. The woman clenched her clipboard so tightly her knuckles went white. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath. The man beside her tried to regain some composure. We'll take this up with the board. We'll find something. Nobody just walks in and defies the HOA like that." But deep down, both of them knew the truth. Marcus Steele wasn't like anybody else. Inside the mansion, Marcus's SUV rolled to a smooth stop in the circular driveway. His crew followed, scanning the property with eyes that never stopped working. To them, this wasn't just a mansion. It was ground to secure, defend, and protect. As Marcus stepped out, his boots echoed against the marble steps. He paused at the front door, letting the weight of it sink in. This wasn't just a house. It was the culmination of years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. But as he looked around, he didn't smile. He wasn't celebrating. He was calculating. Torres came up beside him, lowering his voice. "Boss, you want us to stick around? Keep watch?" Marcus glanced back at the gates, then at the horizon. He could feel it in his gut. This wasn't the last move the HOA was going to make. "Yeah," Marcus said. "We'll set rotations. I want eyes everywhere. They've made it clear they don't want me here. That means they'll try again." The crew nodded without hesitation. Orders given. Orders received. The HOA's emergency meeting. Across the neighborhood, the HOA board gathered in a stuffy clubhouse room. The long table was littered with papers, bylaws, and steaming cups of coffee nobody was drinking. The woman from the gate, her name was Linda Carver, stood at the head of the table. Furious. "He embarrassed us," she snapped. "In front of half the community. If we let this slide, we lose all control." One of the older board members adjusted his glasses. "But Linda, the documents were valid. The house is his. We can't stop him legally." Linda slammed her clipboard onto the table. "Then we find another way. You think people like him should live here? In our neighborhood?" A murmur of agreement rippled through a few of the members, though some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They all knew what she meant, even if she didn't say it out loud. "This is about more than one house," Linda continued. "It's about order. If he can defy us on day one, what's next? We'll lose the whole neighborhood." The board voted quickly. They would find a way to push Marcus out. Whether it was by technicalities, fines, or intimidation, it didn't matter. The war had just begun. Marcus at night. Hours later, the mansion stood quiet under the moonlight. The halls echoed faintly with the creak of new furniture being moved in. But Marcus wasn't resting. He stood on the balcony, gazing over the vast property, a glass of water in hand. Behind him, Torres approached quietly. "They're planning something," Torres said. "I've been listening in. The HOA's rattled, but they're not backing down." Marcus nodded slowly. "Good. Let them come. I didn't fight half the world just to get pushed around in my own backyard." He took a slow sip, his eyes narrowing at the dark street beyond the gates. "You know what the difference is between them and us, Torres?" Torres shook his head. "They make threats. We make promises." The silence that followed carried weight heavier than steel. The first strike. The hallway didn't waste time. The next morning, Marcus woke to find a bright orange violation notice taped to his gate. "Grass exceeds acceptable length. Fine, $500. Marcus stared at it, then laughed. His lawn was perfectly trimmed, the envy of any landscaper. A second notice followed later that day. Improper vehicle on property? Fine, $1,000. Marcus walked to his driveway. His SUV gleamed like it had just left the showroom. The fines weren't about rules. They were about sending a message. Marcus crumpled the notices in his fist and tossed them aside. If they want a war, of paper they'll lose faster than on the battlefield. The crew reacts. Inside, the special ops crew gathered around the dining table. Papers spread out like battle maps. They're trying to choke you out financially, said Torres. Bleed you with bogus fines until it's easier to sell and leave. Marcus smirked. They don't realize who they're dealing with. I've fought governments, dictators, entire armies. A few paper pushers with clipboards, please. One of the younger operators, Jackson, leaned forward. So what's the move, boss? Marcus looked around the table, his eyes hard. The move is patience. We let them make mistakes. We let them show their hand. And when they do, we flip the whole board, foreshadowing trouble. Late that night, Marcus walked the perimeter alone. The cool air cut against his skin, but his mind was razor sharp. He paused at the gate, staring at the street beyond. A car slowed down, its headlights sweeping across him before speeding off. He recognized the silhouette of Linda Carver behind the wheel. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Marcus tightened his jaw. For years, he had fought battles where the enemy wore uniforms, carried rifles, and came straight at him. But this was a different kind of battlefield. One where the enemy smiled in your face while plotting behind your back. He whispered to himself, almost like a vow. They want a war? They're gonna get one. The wind rustled the trees. Somewhere deep in the mansion, his crew stirred, sensing the shift in the air. Because Marcus Steele wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. He was fighting for his place, his right, his respect. And he was willing to bring the full weight of his past life crashing down on anyone who tried to take it from him. If your HOA started targeting you with fake fines and harassment, would you fight back or pack up and leave? Comment your take below. The morning sun broke across the mansion's glass windows, painting the rooms in golden light. But the peace didn't last long. Marcus had barely finished his first cup of coffee when Torres came storming into the kitchen holding a thick envelope. Boss, you'll want to see this. Marcus opened it, eyes scanning quickly. Inside were a stack of violation notices, all dated that morning. Unauthorized security presence. Fine, $2,500. Improper exterior lighting. Fine, $200. Noise disturbance reported. Fine, $800. Marcus set the papers down and laughed bitterly. Noise disturbance? I didn't even turn on the TV last night. Torres shook his head. They're fabricating everything. It's a full-blown campaign. Marcus's jaw tightened. Good. Let them keep stacking their lies. Every piece of paper is another nail in their own coffin. The HOA's dirty play. Meanwhile, at the HOA office, Linda Carver was orchestrating the assault like a general at war. They want to play games? We'll bury him in fines, she told the board. We'll make it impossible for him to live here peacefully. He'll either sell and leave or we'll drag him through court until he begs to get out. One timid board member raised a hand. But Linda, what if he fights back? He's not exactly ordinary. Linda smirked. Let him. He doesn't know who he's dealing with either. We own this community. The room nodded reluctantly, but unease flickered in their eyes. Some of them had seen Marcus that day at the gate. They knew he wasn't the kind of man to fold. The crew's counter. Back at the mansion, Marcus's crew gathered in the study. Their laptops glowing as files, maps, and surveillance feeds filled the screens. Jackson leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. These people have no idea the level of surveillance we can run. They're still playing neighborhood. Cop while we're running. Intel like it's Baghdad. Torres grinned. Then let's start pulling threads. Within hours, the crew dug up everything. HOA board members' property records, financial reports showing misuse of HOA funds, secret fines pocketed for personal vacations. Marcus studied the files, his face calm but his eyes burning. They thought they could bury me under paperwork, he said quietly. But they forgot. Paper cuts bleed both ways. The harassment begins. That night, the harassment got physical. A sprinkler system mysteriously flooded Marcus's front lawn. A neighbor accidentally dumped trash bags at the edge of his driveway. Someone even scratched the side of his SUV with a key. The crew moved fast. Cameras installed, sensors placed, patrols set up. But Marcus didn't flinch. He knew this wasn't about lawns, lights, or cars. It was about intimidation. Torres approached him late that evening. "Boss, give me the go. We'll shut this whole thing down in one night." Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. Patience. Let them show just how dirty they're willing to get. Then, when the world sees the truth, we'll burn their little empire to the ground." Linda crosses the line. The next morning, Marcus opened his mailbox to find a certified letter. Inside was a notice of intent to foreclose on his property. The reason? Unpaid HOA fines. The total, $1,400. Marcus's crew gathered around the letter, jaws dropping. "They can't do this," Jackson growled. "It's illegal." Marcus's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Exactly, and now, we've got them." He set the letter down carefully, as if it were evidence in a case, and in a way it was. "From this moment on," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, "we stop waiting. We hit back. The first strike back." That evening, Torres and Jackson visited the HOA clubhouse. Not loudly, not violently, just quiet and calculated. They walked in during a board meeting, dressed in plain clothes but carrying themselves with the confidence of men who'd seen war. Linda froze mid-sentence when she saw them. Torres laid a folder on the table and slid it across. "Funny thing," he said casually. "We've been doing some reading. Looks like HOA funds paid for your trip to Cabo last year. And that new Lexus in your driveway? Bought with community money, wasn't it?" The board members' faces went pale. Linda's eyes widened in fury. "You're bluffing." Jackson smirked. "Try us. These documents? They're copies. Originals are in a safe place. You push one more bogus fine on Marcus Steele, and let's just say, this neighborhood will see who the real fraud is." The silence in the room was deafening. Torres leaned closer, his voice dropping to a razor-sharp whisper. "You don't want to know how far we're willing to go." The shift in power. That night, word spread like wildfire through the community. Neighbors whispered that the HOA was corrupt, that Linda and her cronies were pocketing money. Some didn't believe it. Others had suspected it all along. Either way, the HOA's reputation was cracking. From his balcony, Marcus watched the lights across the neighborhood flicker out one by one. He knew battles weren't just fought with bullets, they were fought with truth, patience, and precision. Torres joined him, lighting a cigar. "Think they'll back down now?" Marcus shook his head. "Not people like Linda, she's cornered. And when people like that feel cornered, that's when they're most dangerous." He took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. "But so am I." The calm before the storm. For a few days, things went quiet. No new fines, no fresh harassment. It was almost too quiet. Marcus's instincts screamed at him. He'd seen this pattern before in combat. The enemy retreating, regrouping, planning something bigger. And he was right. Because Linda Carver wasn't done. She wasn't backing down. She was calling in favors, pulling strings, and preparing to launch her boldest move yet. A move that would drag Marcus and his crew into a showdown. That would make the gate incident look like child's play. And when it came, Marcus would be ready. Because unlike Linda, Marcus Steele never played defense. If you were Marcus, would you expose the HOA corruption publicly right away, or hold on to the evidence as leverage like he did? Share your thoughts below. The HOA clubhouse lights burned late into the night. Linda Carver sat at the head of the table, her manicured nails drumming against polished wood. Her pride was bruised, her authority shaken, and her reputation on the verge of collapse. She wasn't about to let some outsider, especially Marcus Steele, tear down everything she controlled. "We're past fines," Linda hissed to the few board members who still followed her. "He's not afraid of paper. He's not afraid of gossip. If we want him gone, we'll have to escalate." One board member whispered nervously, "What are you suggesting, Linda? This isn't war." She leaned in, her voice cold. "Then maybe it's time we make it one." The mysterious visitors. 2 nights later, Marcus's crew picked up movement on the perimeter cameras. A dark sedan circled the block twice, headlights dimmed. At 2:14 a.m., it stopped just outside the gate. 4 figures stepped out, hoods up, gloves on. Jackson's voice came through the comms first. "Boss, we've got company." Marcus was already awake, seated in his study, the glow of the security monitors lighting his face. He watched as the figures slipped something from their pockets. Spray cans, crowbars, and what looked suspiciously like Molotov cocktails. His eyes narrowed. They just graduated from harassment to sabotage. Torres's voice came next. Orders. Marcus stood slowly, calm as ever. We don't call the cops. We handle this our way. The break-in attempt. The intruders moved fast. One sprayed graffiti across the stone wall. Not welcome. Another tried prying at the gate's lock. A third poured gasoline along the base of the mailbox. But before they could finish, the mansion's exterior lights blazed on, flooding the driveway with blinding brightness. The intruders froze, and then shadows moved. From the sides of the property, Marcus's crew emerged, silent and precise. Torres, Jackson, and two others flanked the men with surgical coordination. Evening, boys, Torres said coolly, stepping out from the shadows. Out for a walk? The intruders spun around, startled. One dropped his can of gas, hands shaking. Before they could react further, Marcus stepped through the front gates himself, wearing a plain black t-shirt and calm expression. His presence alone froze them in place. You picked the wrong house, Marcus said evenly. The confrontation. One of the intruders tried to sound tough. We're just sending a message. People like you don't belong here. Marcus's crew bristled, but Marcus raised a hand, keeping them back. His eyes bored into the young man. You're not sending a message. You're delivering one, Marcus said, his tone quiet but lethal. So let me ask you, who sent you? The intruder hesitated, then looked away. That was all Marcus needed. Linda Carver, Marcus said flatly. She thinks she can outsource her dirty work now. None of the intruders denied it. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. You want to know what's funny? I've seen tougher men than you break in places you wouldn't last a day, and every single one of them thought they had the upper hand until they didn't. The intruder swallowed hard, his bravado collapsing. Marcus gestured toward the street. Leave, now, and tell Linda. She just declared war. The men scattered into their sedan, peeling away into the night. Marcus turned back to his crew. His expression was calm, but his words carried fire. She made her move. Now we make ours. The crew prepares. Back inside, the study became a war room. Laptops hummed, maps unfolded, cameras replayed footage of the attempted sabotage. Torres slammed his fist against the table. Boss, that wasn't vandalism. That was arson waiting to happen. They wanted you burned out. Marcus nodded slowly. Exactly. Which means Linda's desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy, and sloppy people leave evidence. Jackson cracked his knuckles. Then let's dig deeper. Find the trail. We'll smoke her out. Marcus leaned forward, his voice like iron. No more waiting. From this moment forward, we don't just defend, we strike. Linda doubles down. But Linda wasn't done. The very next day, she called an emergency community meeting. Flyers went out, gossip spread, and by evening the clubhouse was packed with residents. Linda stood at the podium, her tone dripping with venom. Neighbors, she began, we all saw what happened last week. We have a man living among us who brings gangs, intimidation and violence to our peaceful community. Last night, several residents reported suspicious activity near his property. This isn't safe. For our children, for our families, for any of us. Gasps rippled through the room. Some nodded, others frowned, unsure. Linda pressed on. If we don't act, this man will destroy everything we've built here. I'm calling for a full community vote to have. Marcus Steele removed from the HOA and forced to sell his home. The room erupted into whispers. Some cheered. Others looked uncomfortable. The line was being drawn. Marcus's response. Word of the meeting reached Marcus within the hour. His crew watched the live stream from hidden cameras, recording every word Linda spewed. Marcus sat calmly at the head of the table, watching with folded arms. They want a vote? He said finally. Then we'll give them a show. Torres grinned. You're planning to show up, aren't you? Marcus's eyes glinted. Not just show up. We're going to remind them who I am. And why you don't start fires you can't control. The calm before the explosion. That night, Marcus stood on his balcony again, looking out over the dark neighborhood. His crew moved quietly inside, preparing for what was coming. He knew Linda's next move wouldn't just be political. She had already tried intimidation, vandalism, even arson. Next, she'd try something bigger, something that could destroy reputations or lives. But Marcus had lived through far worse, and if Linda Carver wanted war, she was about to learn what war really looked like. He whispered into the night air, almost like a promise. "You want me gone? You'll have to fight harder than any enemy I've ever faced." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying his vow into the darkness. And somewhere across the neighborhood, Linda was plotting her deadliest move yet. If you were in Marcus's shoes, would you keep letting the HOA push until you had enough evidence, or would you strike back hard now? Share your thoughts below. The HOA vote was still weeks away, but Marcus knew Linda wouldn't wait. She was impatient, reckless, and desperate to break him. That made her dangerous, and she proved it just 3 nights later. The late-night delivery. At 3:07 a.m., a white panel van crept down the street, headlights off. It paused near Marcus's east gate. On the mansion's monitors, Jackson was the first to see it. "Boss," he said into comms, "we've got an unmarked vehicle slowing by the perimeter." 3 figures inside. Marcus set down his coffee, eyes narrowing. "Zoom in." The infrared camera revealed 2 men stepping out with duffel bags, slung over their shoulders. They moved quickly, checking the street, avoiding lights. Torres cursed softly. "That's not teenage punks. That's a breach team." Marcus rose from his chair, calm as ever. "Positions. Non-lethal first, but I want them alive." The breach attempt. The intruders worked fast, cutting through the padlock on the east gate with industrial bolt cutters. Within 30 seconds, they were inside the perimeter. One pulled a cylindrical device from his bag. Jackson's stomach dropped. "Boss, that's a smoke grenade. They're planning a raid." The others pulled out compact crowbars and flashlights, moving toward the side of the house. Their movements were sharp, tactical, trained men, not random vandals. Torres whispered over comms, "Linda didn't just hire thugs. These are mercs." Marcus strikes back. The mansion's exterior lights didn't flick on this time. Instead, the intruders moved in silence, unaware they were already surrounded. Marcus's crew melted out of the shadows, silent as wolves. Torres flanked left, Jackson covered right, 2 others closed the rear. Marcus himself appeared at the center path, calm and unarmed, letting his presence hit first. The lead intruder froze. "What the hell?" Before he could finish, Torres shoved him face first into the grass, wrenching the smoke grenade from his hand. Jackson disarmed the second with a chokehold, dragging him down without a sound. The third tried to run until Marcus stepped in his path. The man swung wildly with a crowbar. Marcus sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted until the crowbar clattered to the ground. The intruder crumpled, groaning. In less than 60 seconds, the breach team was subdued. The interrogation. The 3 intruders were dragged into Marcus's garage, zip-tied to chairs beneath the harsh white lights. Torres paced in front of them, his temper boiling. "You idiots came here with military gear. You think this is some game?" Marcus crouched in front of the leader, his voice low and steady. "Who sent you?" The man clamped his jaw shut. Marcus sighed. "You don't want to answer me, I get it. But you're not worried about me. You should be worried about him." He nodded toward Torres, who was tapping a knife against his palm with deliberate rhythm. The intruder swallowed hard, sweat dripping. Finally, he broke. We were contracted. Cash, anonymous drop. But the middleman's name... Carver! Linda Carver!" Torres slammed the table. "Knew it." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "So she escalated to mercenaries." He leaned closer, his stare ice cold. "Tell me exactly what your orders were." The man stammered. "Intimidation. Smoke. Out the house. Force you to leave before the vote." Marcus straightened, exhaling slowly. "She thinks I'll fold." A message sent back. Marcus turned to his crew. "Cut them loose." Torres blinked. "Boss?" "Cut them loose," Marcus repeated. "But not before we send a message." Within minutes, the 3 intruders were released at the edge of the neighborhood. Their duffel bags had been emptied. Every weapon, every tool broken into useless pieces. Taped to the windshield of their van was a simple note, written in Marcus's bold handwriting, "Next time you don't walk away." The men drove off pale-faced, already regretting their deal with Linda. Linda's fury. By the next morning, Linda was pacing her living room, heels clicking against hardwood. The intruders had called her at dawn, rattled and furious, demanding double payment. "You said he was just some ex-soldier." one barked over the phone. That man runs with a trained crew. We're not touching him again. Linda's face flushed red. Cowards! You'll do what I pay you to do. But the line went dead. She hurled the phone against the wall, shattering it. Marcus Steele had turned her own plan against her. Worse, word was spreading that Linda had hired criminals. The very neighbors she'd tried to rally were starting to whisper against her. She needed a new plan. Something bigger. Something that would break Marcus publicly. Marcus prepares for war. Meanwhile, Marcus sat with his crew in the study, sipping coffee as though the night's events hadn't happened. Torres leaned forward. Boss, she's not stopping. She'll double down. We should hit her first. Jackson nodded. Expose her to the community. Show them what she's done. Marcus considered it, then shook his head. Not yet. Timing is everything. If we strike too early, it looks like retaliation. We wait until she gives us the bullet, then we fire. Torres frowned. And what if that bullet's aimed at us? Marcus's expression hardened. Then we catch it and send it back. The calm before the next storm. That evening, Marcus walked the perimeter of his estate. The air was still, the neighborhood quiet, but he felt the storm brewing. Linda had tried intimidation. She had tried violence. Next, she would try reputation, something far harder to fight. But Marcus wasn't worried. He had faced worse in combat zones across the world. This was just another battlefield, and he never lost a war. He looked out across the quiet suburban street, his voice a low promise. Your move, Linda. Make it count. If you were Marcus, would you go public right now and expose Linda for hiring mercenaries, or hold your ground and wait for her next mistake? Drop your answer below. Linda Carver had failed to intimidate Marcus with fines. She had failed to scare him with hired thugs. Now she was cornered, desperate, and humiliated. And desperate people always went for the jugular. For Linda, that meant Marcus's reputation. The headlines hit. It started with whispers, a few neighbors muttering by the pool, a cold glance at the grocery store. Then it spread to the local Facebook group. And then boom. Marcus woke one morning to see his face plastered across a local online news site. The headline screamed, Ex-Special Ops Soldier Turns Gated Community into War Zone. The article painted him as aggressive, paranoid, even dangerous. It claimed his armed associates patrolled the neighborhood, frightening families and children. It even suggested he was running some kind of private militia from his mansion. Marcus set the tablet down, jaw tight. Linda? Torres read over his shoulder, fuming. She fed them this garbage. Look at these quotes. Anonymous HOA sources? That's her. Jackson slammed his coffee mug on the counter. Boss, she's trying to poison the well. She can't beat you head on, so she's trying to make the whole community hate you. Marcus leaned back in his chair, expression calm but his eyes burning. Then she just made her biggest mistake yet. She underestimated what happens when you push a soldier into a corner. The community splits. Within days, the neighborhood turned into a battleground of whispers and opinions. Some neighbors believed Linda's lies, convinced Marcus was a dangerous outsider bringing chaos. Others doubted her, remembering her years of manipulation and control. At the clubhouse pool, two women argued so loudly the lifeguard had to intervene. One shouted, "He's got men with guns! I don't feel safe." The other snapped back, "Linda's been lying for years and you know it. Marcus has done more for this neighborhood in 3 weeks than she has in 10 years. Lines were being drawn, and Marcus knew Linda would push harder. The crew's frustration. Back at the mansion, the crew gathered in the study, tension thick in the air. Jackson paced like a caged animal. Boss, let us dig into her life. We'll find dirt, bank fraud, shady dealings, something. People like her always have skeletons. Torres nodded. One leak, one scandal, and she's finished. Marcus shook his head. Not yet. We don't fight lies with lies. That makes us no better than her. We wait. She'll slip, and when she does, we'll expose her with truth. The crew groaned, frustrated. They were soldiers, trained to strike. Waiting was the hardest thing to do, but Marcus had patience. He'd fought in deserts where one wrong move meant death. Compared to that, this was just noise. Linda turns up the heat. Not satisfied with the smear articles, Linda launched her boldest move yet, flyers. One morning, every doorstep in the neighborhood had a paper with bold red letters. Is your family safe? A soldier's private army next door! It claimed Marcus's team had weapons stockpiled and suggested he was running. paramilitary drills inside his home. Neighbors gasped. Parents clutched their kids. A few even whispered about calling the police. When Marcus's crew saw the flyer, Torres nearly ripped it in half. "She's trying to get the cops called on us. If SWAT shows up, this could go south fast." Marcus studied the flyer carefully. "She's not just trying to win the vote. She's trying to paint me as a criminal, force me out by any means necessary." His eyes darkened. "Then it's time we take the fight public." The public response. Marcus agreed to attend the next HOA town hall meeting. His crew advised against it. "It's a trap, boss," Jackson warned, but Marcus insisted. "I won't hide. Let them look me in the eye. Let them decide for themselves who's lying." The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Residents filled every chair, some standing along the walls. Tension buzzed like static in the air. Linda took the podium first, voice dripping with authority. "Neighbors," she began, "I warned you. This man is turning our peaceful community into a combat zone. You've seen the reports. You've seen the flyers. Ask yourselves, do you feel safe with him here?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Some frowned. Then Marcus stood. The room went dead silent. Marcus speaks. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He simply walked to the front, shoulders squared, and looked every resident in the eye. "I moved here for peace," he began. "After years overseas, I wanted quiet. A home, a place to live, not fight." He held up one of Linda's flyers. This is fear-mongering. These men you call a militia." He gestured to his crew at the back. "They're my brothers, veterans, soldiers, who stood between you and chaos while you slept, safe in your beds. They don't bring danger. They know how to stop it." Some residents nodded, moved. Others looked uncertain. Marcus's voice grew firmer. "Ask yourselves, have I ever harmed a single one of you? Or have I only defended myself and my property when pushed? The real danger here isn't me. It's lies. It's manipulation. It's someone who will burn down the truth just to hold power." All eyes turned toward Linda. Her face flushed red. The turning tide. Whispers surged. A few residents clapped, then more. Soon half the room was applauding. Linda banged her hand on the podium. "He's twisting your minds. Don't fall for his act." But the damage was done. For the first time, the community saw Marcus not as a threat, but as a man standing his ground. The aftermath. Later that night, Marcus and his crew sat on the balcony. The neighborhood was quieter. The tension, though still heavy, had shifted. "She's losing them," Jackson said with a grin. "You crushed her tonight." Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. People are divided. Some will still believe her lies, and she knows it. Which means she's not finished." Torres leaned forward. "Then what's her next move?" Marcus stared into the dark street, his voice steady. "She'll stop hiding behind rumors. She'll come after us directly. And when she does, we'll be ready. If you were Marcus, would you expose Linda fully right now? Or wait until she makes her? Biggest mistake? Drop your choice below." The HOA meeting had cracked Linda's mask. For the first time, the community had seen Marcus stand tall and call her out. And while many were beginning to doubt her, Linda wasn't finished. If she couldn't win through lies, she would win through force. And this time, she wasn't sending pawns. The setup. 3 nights later, Marcus's security monitors picked up another anomaly. 2 SUVs pulled into the neighborhood after midnight. They parked 3 blocks away. Jackson's voice came over comms. "Boss, those aren't neighbors. That's a tactical convoy." Torres zoomed in. 6 men, body armor, earpieces, semi-professional. This is no HOA stunt. Linda hired a real private security team. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then tonight it ends. The breach begins. The mercenaries moved fast, disabling one of the perimeter cameras with a jammer. Then they cut power to the front gate. But Marcus had built redundancies. Backup systems snapped on immediately. Inside, the crew gathered their gear. "Non-lethal until I say otherwise," Marcus ordered. "We show the neighborhood who the real aggressors are." The team nodded, slipping into positions. The clash at the mansion. The mercenaries stormed the driveway, weapons drawn. But before they could breach, floodlights flared to life, blinding them. Torres and Jackson hit first, dropping smoke canisters at their feet. Confusion spread as the mercs stumbled. Then Marcus emerged from the shadows, his voice echoing across the property. You came to my home. My rules. A fight erupted, silent, efficient, brutal. Torres disarmed one merc with a sweep, sending him crashing into the gravel. Jackson tackled another, zip-tying his wrists before he could recover. Marcus faced the leader. The man swung a baton. Marcus countered with a clean block, twisted his arm and dropped him flat in the dirt. Within minutes, 6 mercenaries were subdued, alive, but humiliated. Caught on camera, unbeknownst to Linda, Marcus had routed every security, feed to a cloud server, and broadcasted. The footage straight to the private neighborhood forum. While Linda thought she was orchestrating a takedown, the entire community was watching her mercenaries attempt a midnight assault. Phones buzzed across the neighborhood. Residents gasped in their living rooms. Some even drove over, gathering outside Marcus's gates as the scene unfolded live on their screens. By the time Linda herself arrived, furious and unhinged, the neighborhood was already there, whispering, recording, watching. The confrontation. Linda stormed up the driveway, heels clicking, face twisted with rage. "What have you done?" she screeched. "You've staged this entire thing." Marcus stood calmly at the top of the steps, arms folded. Behind him, the subdued mercenary sat zip-tied, evidence of her betrayal. "I didn't stage anything," Marcus said evenly. "But you did." He gestured toward the crowd beyond the gate. "They saw everything, Linda, the lies, the smear campaign, and now hired criminals trying to break into a neighbor's home." Phones were raised. Cameras flashed. Linda spun toward the crowd, desperate. "He's manipulating you! Can't you see? He's dangerous!" But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. One neighbor shouted, "We saw your man!" Another added, "You put our families in danger!" The tide had turned. Linda's fall. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Police cruisers pulled up, officers spilling out. Marcus handed over the mercenaries without protest, showing the footage as evidence. The officers listened, nodded, and turned their attention to Linda. "Ma'am," one officer said, "we'll need you to come with us for questioning." Linda's face went pale. "Me? I didn't do anything." But the neighborhood had already judged her. Residents shook their heads, whispering. The queen of the HOA had fallen, exposed for the manipulative fraud she was. As officers escorted her away, Linda screamed, "This isn't over, Marcus! You'll regret this." But everyone knew it was. The aftermath. Days later, the HOA voted, not on Marcus's removal, but on Linda's. She was stripped of her position, barred from the board, and forced to sell her own house under pressure from furious neighbors. The flyers disappeared, the gossip died down, and slowly the community began to heal. Marcus, for his part, remained quiet. He hadn't come to wage war. But when war came to his doorstep, he had finished it. A quiet victory. One evening, weeks later, Marcus sat on his balcony with his crew. The neighborhood was calm, children playing in yards, couples walking dogs. Torres smirked. "Boss, you basically turned a suburban HOA into a battlefield and still came out on top." Jackson chuckled. "Yeah, they wanted a villain. Instead, they got a protector." Marcus didn't smile. He just sipped his coffee, gaze steady on the horizon. "They'll forget the fights," he said quietly. "But they'll remember one thing. This neighborhood is safe, and no one, HOA or otherwise, messes with my home." The crew nodded, a silent oath shared between them. The war was over. Peace at last had returned. If you stood in Marcus's shoes, would you have handled Linda with patience until she destroyed herself, or taken her down earlier with force? Share your thoughts below, and remember, sometimes the quietest neighbor hides the strongest fight.